Professor Charles Xavier. He is the man. Oh, hi there. I was reading my encyclopedia of the Uncanny X-Men. And of course that there is my topic for today. And as you can tell, I'm wearing an X-Men shirt of Wolverine. And of course I like to do my impression of Wolverine, if you don't mind. I'm the best at what I do, Bob. And what I do ain't pretty. Took some knives and just made it like that. Now, a long time ago, it was created by a comic book that not many people even notice. And it was created by the legendary godfather of Marvel Comics. His name was Stan Lee. And of course, I can do a good impression of Stan Lee. Trust me, true believers. If you believe you might be able to have powers like Spider-Man, or maybe have technology like Iron Man, or be the member of the Fantastic Four, and of course the X-Men. I mean, he is the godfather of Marvel Comics. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't even know about the comic books of today in the Marvel Universe. And of course, what I have here, it's not a reprint comic, but a reprint of all the comics together, a graphic novel of the classic X-Men. This graphic novel is I got comic book stories inside of this, 1 to 10 stories in this. Now, from the beginning, Stan Lee wanted to create a group of superheroes who are born with powers. No accidental whatever, no disasters, not being shot by gamma radiation or being bitten by a radioactive spider. He wants people to be born as mutants, being born with powers. But from the beginning, Stan Lee wanted to call them mutants. But of course his publisher told him, Stan, you can't call them mutants because nobody don't know what a mutant is. So therefore he decided to call them the X-Men. And they are a group of mutant people. And we're living in the story, they're living in a society where now people are being born as mutants, and the whole world fears and hates them. So it kind of points to prejudice. I mean, somebody who had been picked on in high school, or someone been picked on by somebody who's either racist or a bigot or whatever, can relate to that. And Professor X, he wanted to have a vision of human and mutant coexist in peace. So therefore he created a team called the X-Men. And of course he created a school for the gifted to help young mutants with powers not to be afraid of the outside world. And therefore he called them the X-Men because his last name is Xavier, starts with an X, and that's why they're called the X-Men. That's Xavier's men. That's all part of the comic. And of course, in the original team in the 60s was Cyclops, Jean Grey, Iceman, Beast, and Angel. And they were the original team of the X-Men. And around the 70s, they made a new issue that I don't have, where they introduced Storm, and of course the legendary Wolverine, and also Nightcrawler. Now, the reason why I'm telling you about the X-Men is because I usually don't have that many Marvel characters that I can relate to, but I came across one that I finally figured out that this character is a lot like me. And his name is Professor Xavier. That's right. I'm related to Professor X. Me and him have the same height, same weight, same eye color, and the same hair color before he went bald. The reason why he went bald is because his mutant powers got so strong that he started losing his hair. His mutant ability is that he can he could read other people's minds, and even also he can control them with his minds, but he doesn't want to use it for evil. He only uses it against evil mutants who dare threaten him. And that's why his dear friend Magneto always wears that helmet to block his telepathy. The reason And of course, one thing about his friend Magneto, he got evil because his origin story, he was a young boy in Poland during the time where Adolf Hitler was the ruler of Germany and had all the Jewish people sent to prison camps. And of course, Magneto, aka Eric Lancashire, or call him Magnus, as you wish, he was a Polish Jewish guy. His parents was murdered in the concentration camps, and he lived his entire life with prejudice against the Nazis until he finally escaped from camp, and also went to America and met Professor X, and they became good friends until he finally discovers that the human race ain't accepting the mutants. Everybody thinks mutants is a bunch of freak of nature. Actually, it's part of an evolution, per se. People are being born with powers, and I always think it's pretty cool. It's just too bad nobody ever understands it. And that's why Magneto creates a group called the Brotherhood of Mutants, and what they do is they want to kill the human race, so the mutants will rule the Earth. But Professor X, he wants humans and mutants to coexist in peace. That's why the X-Men. And of course, the reason now, some of you are wondering why I can relate to Professor X is not only about the same height and all. Here's a little something I'm going to tell you guys. It would shock you. Some of you who don't know it, and some of you do know it. I am a highly functioning autistic. That's true. And I can relate to Professor X because I'd been picked on in high school, so I know what it's like to be treated different. And, of course, back then in high school, people never know anything about autism. People used to thought of me as either crazy or retard or something like that. But, of course, there were some people who did understand me. They understood me, and they got easy on me until I developed my ability of doing impressions. So therefore I felt like I'm Professor Charles Xavier. That's my impression of Professor X. I am a mutant, and I'm here to help you. Anyway, back then in the 60s, they did do a pilot of a cartoon called the X-Men. It was called Pride and the X-Men. And it's telling the story about one mutant named Kitty Pryde, also known as Shadowcat. She has a mutant ability to walk through walls. It was a pretty interesting pilot, but sadly the problem is about Wolverine. I don't know why that the guy who does the voice of Wolverine decided to give Wolverine an Australian accent. I mean, he sounds more like this. I'm the best at what I do, and what I do ain't pretty. Of course, in the comics, Wolverine, he's Canadian. And it's too bad. I mean, even though he's Canadian, it'd be kind of funny if we heard Wolverine sound like this. Hey, losers, I'm the best at what I do, eh? And what I do ain't pretty, eh? So it's a good thing he always sounds like, I'm the best at what I do, bub. And of course, after the pilot, around the 90s, they did the cartoon series called the X-Men. When I was young, I didn't understand anything about prejudice, and I didn't care much about the X-Men. So I only watched a few cartoons of the X-Men, and back then I was like, everybody hates them, I don't like it. But as I got older, I started to understand more, and I started watching the cartoon. And much to my surprise that I have here in my hand, I got the movies. When they decided to do the X-Men the movies, I got more hooked to it during that time. What I got here is X-Men, the first movie. Now, the movie was good. It wasn't all that spectacular, but it was pretty good. It's sort of like the beginning point of the whole X-Men thing, starring Hugh Jackman as Wolverine and Halle Berry as Storm, and of course Patrick Stewart, The one I got my impression of as Professor X. And here's a funny thing. In the 70s, the cartoon series, Wolverine had an Australian accent. But now in the movie, Hugh Jackman is from Australia. Imagine that. And then I got this one. X-Men 2. And, it was really good. It was very, very good. Introduced that character named Nightcrawler. Even though he looks like a blue demon, but he's really Catholic. And he understood more about prejudice, a lot more than anybody. And he also cheers up anybody who feels down and all. And then here's the one that not many people didn't care much about, is, of course, X-Men 3, The Last Stand. I mean, it was alright, it wasn't all that good. And of course, when I thought they should have done a TV series of Wolverine, pointing this Wolverine story, until they made this, Wolverine Origin. It wasn't all that good, but it was like a start of something. And now I hear they made a new Wolverine movie I didn't saw. But one X-Men movie that I want to see is, of course, X-Men First Class, the origin story of the X-Men. And now there's a new one out that I want to see called X-Men Future Past, where all their future self will meet the past self. I mean, I thought that would be neat. And even I played a few X-Men games along the way in my time. I tried this one, Wolverine's Revenge. In this one, Wolverine has some sort of virus, and he's trying to find a cure for it, or else he'll die. It was really hard. I had to go through online in order to defeat the game. But I still didn't beat it. There were a few characters hard to get rid of. And then they made this one. It was pretty cool. But of course, they made the first one called X-Men Legend. And it's the old battle between the X-Men and the Brotherhood of Mutants. In this one, they made Legend 2, Rise of Apocalypse. Now, compare between Magneto and Apocalypse. Apocalypse is way more evil than Magneto. Apocalypse, he's the oldest living mutant throughout Egypt. And he never gets old. And he never dies. And his ability, he can turn his arms into weapons, and he can make himself grow big. I mean, they say he has powers beyond comprehension. And he also can turn other mutant into his army. He can turn people into one of his army. And that's very evil. And that X-Men game became the most popular and pretty good X-Men game ever made. And then they made this one. Or X-Men Origin of Wolverine, the video game. Since the movie wasn't all that good, but they made the video game, it was way better. And of course, Hugh Jackman himself did the voice of Wolverine. It was pretty entertaining. And now I'm going to show you about another. It's not exactly X-Men, but there's a character from the X-Men that he gets involved to. Deadpool! In case some of you people don't know about him, they call him the Merc with a Mouth. He's a mercenary. He had a bad case of cancer, and they cured it by giving him Wolverine's healing ability. So now he has a healing factor, and he can also teleport himself like Nightcrawler. But one thing he does is he wouldn't stop talking. He's like Robert Williams in a ninja costume, saying things like, "I got a rash, wanna see? Wanna hear me do 1812 Overture on my armpit?" I mean, you cannot stop but just laugh at him saying crazy things. And he also is aware that he's a fictional character, and he always breaks the fourth wall in the comics. I was wondering when they're going to show in the comics where the villain just looks at us, the readers, and grabs Deadpool and says, "Who are you talking to?" "Just the people who's reading this." Anyway, this is my review for today. And thank you all for watching. And, well, bub, time for me to go. Do some Wolverine stuff. Arrgh.